Hello, podcast listeners. It's your host with the most, JJ here. This episode features Kaya K. Nelson. She's a professor at MSUM, and she teaches people how to make movies. So, of course, we talk about movies a lot in this podcast. Plus, we talk about those things that surround movies as well, like popcorn. Have you ever heard of Amish popcorn? Well, you're gonna today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338, Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
I recently went on a trip to Jamaica, the first time I had ever been to Jamaica, and I noticed that there are certain places that really lean into movies that people associate with them. So everywhere you looked, you could find Cool Runnings type gear.
Like us with the wood chipper.
Or when I went to Scotland, and every mug and thing that you could purchase that had William Wallace on it looked just like Mel Gibson. And I think it's great that there are places that really get to have the opportunity to enjoy a celebrity status for the place itself by being associated with a movie of some kind. Minneapolis, I think of Mighty Ducks, right? The Mighty Ducks really showed what Minneapolis was all about. Hockey and kids, ne'er-do-wells and alleys.
Would you consider like the Dark Knight trilogy in Chicago?
No, because it's supposed to be Gotham. I think that's part of the thing is like Cool Runnings is set in Jamaica. Jamaica is part of the character. I think when it's a fictional place, it's different, even though they're the Illinois license plates, but they just said Gotham PD on the side instead. And those calling cards, I think, are things people really love. Okay, so here's another example. The house from Home Alone, the exterior of the house from Home Alone, recently was listed for like $2.5 million. And they ended up selling it for $1.5 million. And one of the reasons the owners said they couldn't sell it was because it's so iconic. So you'd think, oh, that's going to drive the price up because people want to own a part of this. Well, people don't want folks running into their front yard all the time to take a picture, you know, next to the McAllister's doorbell. And so those iconic homes that actually exist, the house that was the exterior for the Brady Bunch was recently for sale, even though the inside looked nothing like it because the inside was a set. I do find it interesting that there are places that people make pilgrimages to because it's associated with the favorite movie or television show. At one point, the owners of the house that they filmed Walter White's house in Breaking Bad said, "Please stop throwing pizzas onto our roof. Please, please, please stop throwing pizzas onto our roof." You would think that it would just be easier for film studios to buy the house and then sell it later on, but they don't. Also, that the family, I believe, that owned the Home Alone house, where they set up a website telling people about how to make money having their house as being a film set. And I thought that's kind of cool, right? So you got some extra income coming in there. Today, we get a great chance to talk with Kaya K. Nelson, and we talk about the education of teaching individuals how to make something. In this case, they're making a film. They're making movies. They're taking something that's in their head and somehow translating it to actors and to set pieces and to lighting and to get the equipment to film what they want. And hopefully what they picture in their head is what they see on the film when they get it back from the distributor. We also find out that Kaya is kind of an underground winter sports aficionado, and she just casually throws off a couple of things that she did, like, I did this for 7 years, no big deal. And we have a very fun conversation that also includes my love of popcorn and a brand new product that you can probably Google and pick up from the middle of this conversation.
This is going to make you hungry for popcorn in this particular episode.
It really is. So I'm going to invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World, and you may find a deeper appreciation for the next time you watch a movie from some of the things that we talk about from the production end of making cinema.
JJ Meets World.
Kaya K. Nelson, welcome to the JJ Meets World studios. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
So let's start with this. Would you introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Kaya, and I am sitting in downtown Fargo. I am a filmmaker, and I do a little bit of animation in there. And I teach over at Minnesota State University in Moorhead. Teach film production.
Are you from this area originally?
I am from this area. Well, yeah, pretty much. I moved to Fargo Moorhead when I was about 9. And then, but at that time, there really wasn't much for film stuff. So there was no Fargo Film Festival. There was no film program. And they were teaching film classes at MSUM. Ted Larson, I don't know if you guys knew him, but
Yep.
So I did take a film class with Ted Larson, but I really wanted to do production. And he said, well, if you just keep, just wait for a couple more years. I thought, well, I don't know. So I ended up leaving and then moved around for quite a while and then came back. Never thought I'd be back here. And here I am.
What year did you come back?
2006, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know, 14 years back now, something like that.
So when you think of yourself as a filmmaker, how many films do you have to make before you consider yourself a filmmaker, do you think?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. I remember having a conversation once with somebody about, it was kind of a similar question about when can you call yourself an artist? And because there was a student, this was a long time ago, this was not at MSUM, but somebody referred to themselves as an artist, and another person got really upset saying, well, you're not an artist.
Some gatekeeping going on there, huh? Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm a little more liberal in my, I think all my students are filmmakers. They've made projects and, but yeah, I think just making content, I don't know if there's a magic number out there, but once you've made a film, and I think part of it too is connecting with audiences. So
this is making me think of a recent kerfluffle in movie circles with Martin Scorsese. Going on the record saying that Marvel movies aren't cinema, right? And it kind of reignited, at least in my world, the sort of debate on what is art, what is or isn't valid. Where do you think you fall along those lines? What's your opinion on what can be deigned to be counted as cinema?
Well,
we're getting heavy right
yeah,
off
you're
the
really.
bat.
I was not
I
expecting.
told you this was going to be
these,
easy, but then I guess we're
Yeah, I feel like these
lie.
are pop quizzes. I don't know. I mean, so I love all kinds. Sometimes I get pegged as the, she makes experimental work, or, we don't know what it's about, or, I don't know. But I like all kinds of movies, and, I love action movies and, silly Christmas rom-com movies and a bunch of other garbage movies. So, but what is cinema? I don't know. I feel like the issue with film is that it oftentimes gets sort of bastardized as, like it's not a fine art. And then there's this whole spectrum of like where video art falls in, and, installation video. And I feel like there's a lot of like territorialism that goes along with that, of like who gets to call themselves an artist or a filmmaker, and, what counts as cinema or not, or it's just a movie. And, but I don't know, I think it's, fun to watch all kinds of content and not get too caught up in labels. And, I think the more that you can just remove the ego from everything, the better. So
I think that applies to so many things other than just art as well.
We'll learn that lesson on JJ Meets World someday.
Yeah, right. I heard a very interesting panel discussion recently where they were talking about how, and these were some gatekeepers who said, well, when the tools are so much easier for people to use and to get a hold of, it diminishes the fact that this is art of some kind. And they talked about the fact that anybody with a cell phone can record something and make a movie and upload it and get an audience.
Right.
So it's not as much art anymore because they didn't have to sit behind a Steinbeck and, edit a film on 8mm and, figure out how this works and do lighting and And I don't subscribe to that idea because everybody, it's to each his own a little bit on that idea, is that whatever you create is whatever you create. Years ago, I wanted to do an art installation that were people's underpants. And it was going to be a fundraiser for testicular cancer, but essentially you'd write a letter to all these people and say, hey, would you send me a pair of underpants? It doesn't have to be one you wore, and I would appreciate it if you didn't send me like a weird, dirty pair of underpants. But then you would put it in a shadow box the same way that like people do those like butterflies and bugs and stuff like that. And then you write a little bit about that person. And I thought, wouldn't that be kind of fun to say like, what underpants represent me? Right? I mean, right? Like, wouldn't that be fun? Like, is it the red polka dot one? Or do you send something in that says, welcome to Velva, North Dakota on it, whatever it just happens to be. And I remember pitching that to some of the art people in Fargo, and they said, no, that's a horrible idea. Why no one would ever want to go to that? And I thought, really? Because I feel like people who maybe don't regularly go to gallery openings would come to this one.
It's a whole new audience.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe they just don't want that audience, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think that you're still thinking about this, and I think that maybe this is still in your future.
Oh, it definitely is. Like
Very Ted Larson of you.
Yeah.
Cultivating his future. That's very good. Yes.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about movies. Okay. Now, do you find like you hate it when people call movies?
I'm going to interrupt you for a
Yeah,
second and remind you that I am not a Matt O'Lean or a Greg Carlson. So I cannot.
Why do you think we invited you here?
If you ask me to call up people's names and years of things, like you've got the wrong guest.
No. In fact,
You're saying you pass as normal in most companies.
I guess.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, I don't teach film history for a reason. So.
Kaya, listen, I took classes from both of those gentlemen, and I could not disagree more with their interpretation of what, is in their home video collection.
What are your thoughts on Captain Ron?
Captain Ron?
The movie with Kurt Russell.
I haven't seen Captain Ron.
Oh, I've got it on my phone. We'll watch it after we're done podcasting.
Kurt Russell. I don't think I've seen that movie.
It's wonderful. Ron. Kurt Russell, Martin Short, Mary Kay Place, a lot of people who went on to do great things, but not necessarily in this movie. It's also got the kid who is in The Nanny, the show The Nanny. Okay, so like, what are some of your favorite movies?
It's like every time somebody asks me that question, my mind just goes like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think like if we want to talk experimental movies, I really love Nostalgia by Hollis Frampton. If anybody ever wants to look that up, it's really awesome. He has these, I haven't seen it for years, but there's like, basically it's like an overhead shot of this boilerplate and it's on. And then he starts putting photographs on and telling you stories about these photographs. And the time it takes to tell the story, the photograph burns up, disintegrates. And then there's another one. But what you start realizing at some point is that the stories he's telling is not necessarily matching the photograph that you're seeing. But in terms of like movies, because, cinema and movies.
You can even continue with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that I'm really looking forward to my favorite Christmas movie, which is Die Hard. Mm-hmm. And so I have a whole like, like you got to watch certain movies at certain times of year. So that would be one of them. The Gremlins is also coming soon. I feel like you got to like really ease into that stuff because, you got to watch kind of the lighter Christmas movies. And then the closer you get to Christmas, the darker they get. That's usually my wind up.
Isn't that interesting that there are very few genres that mix with other genres in the way that Christmas and horror or, that darkness, like Die Hard, Gremlins, a couple of years ago, Krampus was a surprise hit for people. Yeah. But there's something about the holly jolly nature of Christmas that sort of people want to bring down a little bit. And they want to show the darker side.
There's a really fantastic Finnish film. What is it called? It's Exports. Is it special?
Rare Exports.
Rare Exports.
Yes.
Have you seen it?
Mm-hmm, I sure
it's
have.
So good. Have you seen it, Tucker?
I've just heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Oh my goodness. That's a really good one.
That one was
gets into those darker kind of, but it's also like taken from these kind of darker mythological aspects or folklore of Christmas traditions, specifically in Finland. But yeah.
I like stuff like that. And you mentioned The Gremlins. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think Joe Dante is an underrated director because what he does with Gremlins terrified me as a kid, still terrifies me today, but I can't wait to watch it. Uh-huh. And I don't like scary. I'm not a scary movie guy.
Yeah, I don't watch a ton of scary movies either, but
that one's where it's
classic.
At.
Yeah.
And the sequence where Phoebe Cates gives her just a bummer of a speech about her dad coming down the chimney dressed as Santa.
Yeah.
I watched that movie, and when it hits that scene, you can't help but kind of smirk a little bit while she's telling it now. But the first time somebody sees it, they're like, what are we watching? This is horrific.
I showed that film to my daughter, I think for the first time last year. She was 6. We're terrible parents, by the way. Now that
the reason why PG-13 exists
out loud. But yeah, I got to that part and we had kind of forgotten about that part. So we just started making lots of noise, like, oh, shouldn't we go grab a snack or something? Like, oh, this got dark.
That is one of the best audio commentaries I've ever listened to in my life. I highly suggest you give it a chance if you get the opportunity.
Like on the film?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I haven't done that.
There's 2 on for the Gremlins. There's like a technical one where they brought in the people who made the Gremlins and the technical lighting rig folks, and I mean it's really neat to listen to their side because they said, hey, listen, we didn't shoot on a lot of standard sets. We were on the Warner Brothers backlot, and so you can't raise those buildings 6 feet so that you can get all these puppeteers under. We had to figure out different ways to shoot it. We had to do, it's a movie that can't have light in it.
Yeah.
So figuring out like how to light it. But then there's another commentary on there where it's all of the main cast members and then Joe Dante, and it's incredibly insightful.
Cool.
And it's just packed with all of these references to old sci-fi, and Joe Dante was such a huge fan of the just classic cinema, and he's like, I want to put as much of this in here, so I'm going to cast people who, had bit parts in movies, and I just love it. I love Gremlins. Such a good movie. And I even love Gremlins 2 because it's the one time where you can clearly see a director being like, they put a truckload of money in my driveway. And so I said, okay, but I'm going to do it my way. Is it hard for you to watch a movie knowing what you know about the technical aspect of creating a movie and to put yourself just as a strict audience member and not be involved with like, that was a weird, why did they use a wipe?
Sometimes I feel like I can sometimes shut that off a little bit, but that's always there, like all the time students at some point into the first maybe year or 2 years or something, will be like, you guys have ruined movies for us now, because, it's one thing to just kind of watch and enjoy and just, it's more entertainment, I guess. But then once you get into, really that kind of film analysis, like, all the stuff that Ted Larson taught and film appreciation and all of those things that it just sort of changes the way you look at things. So yeah, there's occasionally stuff will air even on television that, you'll just start getting distracted by whatever it is. Like it could be like, sometimes I've even seen things that are just slightly out of sync. Has that happened? And then you just can't let it go. And then you're constantly watching to see like how many frames out of sync it is. And then that you're really not in any way involved in the story or the characters or the emotion or, anything. But yeah, so there is that. It's hard to completely turn that off, I guess. But
is there a genre of film that you think people should appreciate a little bit more and maybe delve into that they're not looking at?
Well, certainly, I think, we started off by talking about that kind of divide between movies and cinema. And then, like, along those same lines, if you kind of think of it as a continuum, it gets into more experimental work. And I think that that's probably the area that just people aren't exposed to, because there's also, you just have to think about like what the market is for that. And, it's not something that people are consuming all the time. So you kind of have to seek it out. If you're living in somewhere like, New York or Los Angeles or like a bigger, even Minneapolis to a degree, but you might be able to find, go to a show at the Walker and find video installation or see a retrospective of some experimental filmmaker. But especially in this area and others, it's just harder to find, and galleries and museums in this area don't tend to program anything like that. They're not programming underwear installations either, apparently.
Not yet.
And so it's all about then like seeking out that kind of content online when you can. Certainly the Fargo Film Festival for years now, we've had an experimental category. And so that's been a really great way to pull stuff like that into the community, just to see kind of what it is. It's one of those things that's much more hard to define too. So a lot of times, like students that I work with will say they're making an experimental film, but it's just a narrative film that might be a little weird,
It's like, when you see it, sort of a thing. How do you define an experimental film? It's really tough to. If anything, you can define it by what it isn't. Much easier, which is probably what most people are used to. To them, a movie is the thing that you see, the major blockbuster that comes out, at the Cineplex, but it can be so many more things than that. I think film too it can be tough because it shares so many technical traits with anything else that you do montage with, television, skits, webisodes, blah, 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 blah. And what oftentimes constitutes something at a film is almost like how you consume it. What you can compare it to other things, and it shares some of those traits, yet it still has frames shot in sequence to give the illusion of motion, and it still has shots shown in montage to give the illusion of continuity. So it's an art form that is so like so many other art forms. It sometimes it feels like it's impossible to define it.
I saw a really amazing installation at the Walker years ago where you had to sit and consume the video piece first, and then you could learn about it afterwards. And learning about it afterwards is kind of how you get the deeper meaning to it. But you sat in this little room. It sat about 15 people, and you see a McDonald's, and it's 5 different viewpoints inside a McDonald's. No other people there, but there's a tray on a table with a burger and fries. And then you see the register, and it's lit up with what the deal of the day is. And then all of a sudden, water starts filling this McDonald's, and it floods and I don't mean floods like you're standing in 2 inches of water. At one point, it comes to the ceiling of this McDonald's. And, so a shot that you saw that was just the McDonald's is now you see burgers floating like in the water. There's some kind of a current that's been created in there. The light bulbs short out when the water gets up to the register. And it was just, it took like 45 minutes to watch this whole thing. And you're watching it and you're like, this is wild. Whatever I'm watching is just wild. And afterwards they talk about how they built a McDonald's from scratch. And they ordered the register that a McDonald's would have, and they built this set, and then they used caulking and made it waterproof, and then hooked it up to fire hoses, and they flooded this McDonald's, right? And so their thing was talking about the busyness of the world and how we can get caught up in the flood of consumerism, and had a lot of really deep meanings. And I still think about that and talk about it probably once a month, where I'm like, and they flooded a McDonald's, and it was amazing. And at one point somebody had to say, this is what I want to do. And they figured out how to do it.
And they had to figure out how much it was going to cost to do.
Oh, it must have been so expensive.
Yeah.
So expensive.
Yeah.
I keep checking YouTube every now and then to see if they're going to upload the video just to YouTube, but I really think you need to experience it with other people in the room, because there were a couple of older folks who were like, what is this? I don't get it. And the wife was like, no, just stay for it. Like, look how, isn't it weird how the fries are like that? Be like, that's exactly what this person wanted, was to suck you into this flooded McDonald's.
So were the French fries like French fries, or did they make them out of some other material?
They were real French fries.
They were real French fries.
Yeah.
I'd be curious what would happen once the water reaches the level of the oil boiling. Does that just send oil everywhere for a couple of minutes while that's going up? And I'm guessing there's electrical needs too to make things function on the inside.
So you never see into like in a regular McDonald's, you don't really see necessarily the full back kitchen.
Okay. It's the seating area.
You see the seating area, you see the counter there, there's a drive-through window, but you never really see beyond there. Because I would have wondered the same thing if it would be incredibly dangerous. You'd never mix oil and water. That's
where do you empty all that water out to afterwards? It's full of French fry oil.
Well, what about this? What if it doesn't go right? What if two of the cameras break down, and now you don't really have all the shots that you need? And I can't imagine what it would be like to undertake something like that and just sit there for 45 minutes and be like, okay, everything looks good.
When you saw it, did you know, I'm going to go see this thing where they flood a McDonald's? Nope. It was just, I wonder what's going to happen. It's filling with water. Oh my God, they're flooding the McDonald's.
Yep. And you wonder where are they going to turn off? You always think, are they just going to turn off the water and show what it's like to see a half flooded McDonald's? Oh, maybe a 3/4. And then when the lights and stuff started burning out when the water hit it, you're like, oh, they are in this thing until the end. They're going to make this happen. I loved it. I had a great time at that installation. John Waters had also curated a piece at the Walker as well. That was a ton of fun. It was at the same time. He had a painting that had really, really, really tiny text. And so you'd have to get really close to see it. But there was a little water spigot that as soon as you got really close, it would spray you in the face.
Oh my God.
And it was,
that's right.
It was kind of off to the side so that you wouldn't see somebody else and what happens to them. And I thought, well, that's weird. How can they do that? And I found out part of the installation included somebody sitting there watching the security camera and going, water.
Oh, no way.
Water.
Wow.
I thought, well, there you go. That's a ton of fun. We also told you that this conversation may go just in weird directions and stuff like that. So as a parent and as a film lover, is it hard to choose what to show your kids and at what time? So you mentioned Gremlins, which is technically PG.
Yeah.
So
I've been tricked by the rating system. I feel like they were much more lenient when we were kids.
Well, Gremlins, fast fact, is one of the reasons PG-13. That and Temple of Doom,
Right.
where we're not R, but we're definitely not PG anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But they still get that rating. I personally am not a fan of the MPAA. I don't, and now they're just the MPA. They don't even include Of America anymore.
They can't be consistent. It's impossible to be consistent. The best example of that is South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, where they literally did nothing of what they were told to do, added more stuff, and got the rating they wanted, which was R instead of NC-17. And I'm all for rating systems if they are helpful to people who want to have some information going in. I can understand that. You're a consumer. You're trying to buy something. And I can understand parents wanting to have control over what images are being projected into the brains of their children. But yeah, the rating system, A, doesn't effectively do that. And B, it actually penalizes artists without having any actual reason to do it. They'll say, no, you have to cut 5 seconds of this gory shot because this group of people who sat in a dark room whose names you'll never know decided that. And that will decide whether or not you are R or NC-17, which will decide whether or not you can actually make any money with this thing that you made. I think that's the thing that grinds my gears the most.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the lack of consistency. Could you think of any other governing agency, even though these are not government employees, this is a private organization, but could you imagine if the health department were just sort of like, well, yeah.
Right. It's like the industry is trying to self-police itself, but I think of the Comics Code Authority, which no longer exists, but for the longest time did. And in the 70s, Stan Lee was like, you know what? We're just going to publish stuff, and if you guys put your seal of approval on it, great, and if you don't, you don't, which is what got us like great stories about drug addiction and drug abuse, about domestic violence, about racism. That was also when they were allowed to start putting skulls and vampires and witches back into comic books again. It used to be frowned on, and the Comics Code Authority came into place because the comics industry wanted to regulate itself so that government didn't come in and regulate them. But at the end of the day, they ended up, the mores of people reading it just changed, and they thought, we don't need your little symbol on the corner of our comic book anymore. It's the only thing I can think of that even comes close to the MPA, but the MPA has the ability to completely railroad your project merely based off the opinions of anonymous people sitting in a theater who get to have quote unquote authority.
Right. And if they don't like Meryl Streep, that personal opinion can influence their rating on something, which is just, who doesn't like Meryl Streep, right?
I wonder if we showed them some of Kaya's movies, what they would rate Kaya's movies.
Yeah, I don't know. They wouldn't be rated, I guess.
Yeah.
There you go.
They wouldn't. They would just be like, "This is not cinema."
Wouldn't that be great though? If like if experimental theater had its own rating system for like, we rate this one as ennui. You'll feel ennui while watching it. This one will make you hungry. We rate this hungry.
So as a parent, is it tough to make that decision?
Well, I mean, I feel like, I don't know if we have shown films that I suppose could have waited a little bit, but I mean, like I said, we'll watch a movie like The Gremlins. We just use that as an example of like this scene came up that I had forgotten about, that was like, ooh, that's a little dark. But I feel like to a certain degree too, it just depends on the kid, because there's some kids that there's just certain content that will, suit them better than others. So I'll give you an example. My dad loves Gremlins, E.T., fine, Goonies. She loves the Goonies. Benji, she's allergic to Benji.
Really?
Yes. Not I can't watch this. She is allergic, she says, to Benji because it's just too sad. And anything that deals with dogs.
So no Milo and Otis, no Old Yeller, no Homeward Bound.
No Marley and Me, nothing like that.
My wife won't watch those either.
No Air Bud.
Probably not.
Oh, no Air Bud. She's missing out.
I think Air Bud is okay. I don't think any of the, if I remember correctly from Air Bud Golden Receiver.
Right. But how many people, a lot of us learn the facts of life from seeing movies about animals, because death is always involved on some level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we try not to, like when it comes to real life thing, I mean, we had to put our dog down unexpectedly, and we asked her if she wanted to come and say goodbye. And, like we gave her several options, so we try not to like pretend that death doesn't exist or, but when it comes to movies, that's oddly like where she draws her own personal line. And I think that it's really healthy that kids can be able to have some kind of control over what content they feel comfortable with. Now, they don't always know going into a film. That's the thing about, so we'll sometimes show trailers and like talk about it first. But I am kind of somewhat picky and snobby about some things. Like, we've got like some Academy Award nominated animated shorts that we'll show, or like, like classic Pixar movies, or, whatever, like, really good kids content, and then, or even just some really off the wall, independent animation, stuff like that. But then it's like, it'll be, she'll discover like a friend or a cousin or something will have, I don't know, what's the show? Is it Barbies or something like that? Like just terrible. It's just terrible content. It just
what are you saying? That's not cinema? Is that what you're saying?
It is not cinema. Barbies.
What a gatekeeper.
But I mean, that's where I have my weird line too of like, it's just like weird mean girl, like talk and not such great storytelling. And just, it's like, what is the value that we're getting out of this? I don't know, but some kind of sociological experiment for sure. I know that much.
Are we still teaching kids celluloid, or have we gone full digital in modern education?
We're still celluloid.
Great.
Yeah.
So film
is not dead.
How long does it take to ship it out to get it back?
We're at the mercy of the lab, and so if you wanted to overnight it back. Depends on what you're processing. So there's like a lab that will still process reversal film like 5 days a week, because there's just enough that they're getting that allows them to do that. Whereas like black and white negative, they might process that like once a week. So if you get it there like the day that they're about to do the thing, you can get it back right away. If you don't, or like if there's the batch of chemicals isn't so great, well, then you got to wait another week. So it's a little bit of a headache, especially when you're working with like a semester timeline, you're working under the umbrella of academia and, but, as you both know, we were just talking about deadlines, deadlines are good, but we do have to manage that, like back time everything because of the lab.
So are they editing and then projecting their work still on cellular, or are you having it processed into digital and then they're editing in a non-linear fashion?
So we have 2 classes that are still, all of our classes are digital except for 2. And one of them is the 16 millimeter production class. That's sort of like the first one. And they'll shoot on 16 and they get it processed. We do a telecine transfer in-house on those because it comes back as a positive print. They shoot on reversal film. So it's not a negative, you can see everything. Blacks are black, whites are whites. And so we'll transfer that for them. They do have to edit projects in that class with a splicer editor. It just teaches them to really slow down and really think a lot about these building blocks. And it teaches exposure in a very different way to shoot on celluloid. It teaches editing in a very different way to have to cut and splice film. But then once they get toward that final project, we allow them to edit it digitally, even though they're still getting back a positive print that we're transferring. In the advanced 16 millimeter class, it's a much bigger kind of crew size. Collaboration is like really kind of a primary element in that class. So you've got a bigger group. It's a double system sync sound. So you've got like sound being recorded with, one team and technology, and then you've got the camera shooting the image. And with that class, it's all shot on negative. So they send it to the lab and then they actually get a telecine transfer there. And so that is sort of like a hybrid workflow that they do, where they're shooting on film, but everything else beyond that is digital. And it allows them then to kind of conceptualize workflow that incorporates digital post-production techniques with film, which is difficult because it's a different aesthetic. Sometimes people will just slap on their weird like Premiere or Final Cut Pro, generator text and stuff like that. And it just looks super plastic compared to the aesthetics of a 16 millimeter film grain. And it just doesn't work. And so they have to think a lot about how do those aesthetics merge and make sense within the context of their project or the genre or the story that they're telling.
Oh, very interesting. I acted in a lot of student films. A lot of it, especially when I was out at Columbia. Like everybody needed to act in everybody else's films. And I remember at one point thinking like, we're all using equipment that's maintained by the college and it's really great, but we don't know what to do if the equipment goes wrong. And I remember spending an entire day in 0-degree weather shooting something for a friend of mine. And then at the end of the day, he went home and he called like an hour later and he goes, "Hey man, I don't think any of this stuff shot. I think that the camera, wasn't working." And I was like, "What do you mean the camera wasn't working? Weren't you weren't doing no checks and balances today?" And he's like, "Well, we got all the sound. And so having to go back and try and do the exact same thing over again the next day. And
was this on film or digital?
It was on film.
Oh yeah.
It was on film. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And I remember though, it's one of the coolest things to hold, like a length of film in your hand and hold it up to the light and see the image finally. And so even though they're the trials and tribulations, there is something magical. And I think that you can really see who are going to become the filmmakers and who are going to become the film enthusiasts during that time, because that filmmaker will, wrap themselves in that celluloid and can sit in that edit bay for hours and hours looking at the same 500 frames, wondering where like, yep, this is the right spot to cut, but I should look at it and again before I cut it. And like, well, okay, well now I've changed it, versus the film lover, who's the person who says, well, I want to get this project done. And then it's good enough once it's done. And they like being around the film. I always think like, well, okay, you find out who's going to be the director and who's going to be the producer by the end of some of those classes.
Yeah. It's, I feel like, even some of our alumni who have gone out, like we have a bunch of alumni in Los Angeles now, and they were talking once about like, because there's this constantly that like film is dead. Why do we have to work with this old technology? But they said it was really fascinating. They'd like never hold on to it as long as you possibly can, because they said that there was a really noticeable difference when they were on set with people who had shot on film before versus video. Just I think in terms of like kind of the expectation and how much time you also put into making sure that everything's lit appropriately. And, just because it really slows you down and it really makes you think a lot about essentially painting with light. I mean, you're dealing with like quantities of light in certain areas. And with video, you just kind of like look at a monitor and be like, it looks pretty good. So yeah, I think it definitely has its challenges, but I think they're good, especially for like a learning environment. It's just really, really, really good. I know when I shot on film, I had like when I was in school, I had, I wanted this underwater sequence, and I went through all this trouble of like getting a pool that had an underwater observatory, and my actress dropped out at the last minute. I mean, there's just so many problems, right? And then the worst problem of all is that I forgot to open the loop catcher on the camera, and I didn't get my film. It just didn't turn out. And so I will never load a camera incorrectly ever again. It's a hard lesson to learn, but I learned it.
And, so many things can be put into that context, not just, making films, but that double check. When I was working in construction, it was measure twice, cut once.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I think that that's applicable to so many different things in life. And so it teaches you to be a little more patient, and it teaches you to be a little more precise and very intentional about the things you're doing. When the first movie I saw that was digitally filmed and then digitally projected was the Tim Burton Sweeney Todd. And I remember because Grand Forks was the first place that had a digital projector, so I drove all the way up there so I could go see it. And the only part of the movie that made me go, oh, God, was watching the credits at the end. Oh. The roll was too smooth. And it looked, you talked about plastic, right? Mm-hmm. It looked false. And when you watch a movie like if you watch Cool Runnings and you watch the credit roll, it looks different than the credit roll for Avengers. And that's one of the weird things that I miss is watching the credits and watching, knowing that somebody sat there and they put all of these names on there and then they transferred it to film, and it's running at the speed that the film's running at. And I miss that. Mm-hmm. But what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of nostalgia around film, like things on film that people want to pretend like it. How people say like, oh, flying back in the day was great. Airlines, people would get dressed up to go on airlines, and the service is so much better. Well, that's a false memory. Flying has always been pretty awful. Like even back in the day, you used to fly in planes where people were smoking for the flight. Could you imagine a 4-hour flight where it's constantly cigarette smoke? The food's never been good because they don't have really great refrigeration or cooking processes. The flight itself has gotten smoother because we're going higher, but back in the day, like your entire flight was up and down and jostling you around. But we have this false memory of men in fedoras and women, in long dresses getting on these flights in the 1950s that don't actually exist. And I think the same thing can be said about some people's love of film, which is you say how much you love it and you miss it, but if you watch White Christmas, a print of it, and it's missing a chunk in the middle because the film had been eaten up at one point, or the magnetic sound strip goes off, you forget, oh yeah, I forgot about stuff like that. I mean, you dealt with that at the Fargo Theater all the time when you're building up prints.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We all get really hung up on aesthetic or substrate versus what is the core art form that you're seeing in front of you, which I would argue is storytelling with montage. That is the core art that you're actually seeing. And that, I love the aesthetic of 35 millimeter film. It looks great. I love the aesthetic of digital when it's done well. But the thing I love more than any of that is, am I being sucked into the thing that I'm watching or not? There's a documentary that Keanu Reeves produced that's about the transfer, like going from an analog world to digital world. I'm blanking on the name.
Yeah, is it called Edge Code? No.
No, I don't think so, but I'm not sure. It's all about filmmaking.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm blanking on the name of it. And so he interviews a ton of people in the industry who are of varying mindsets, right? So you've got, David Fincher over here, who not only has embraced digital filmmaking, but actually helped innovate digital filmmaking. And you'll have Quentin Tarantino over here, who, is a cinephile who fell in love with a certain aesthetic, and that's what he wants to use, and that's understandable. But in there are all these interviews with DPs, directors of photography. And they're all old dudes who have had success and have been in the industry for a long time and clearly feel threatened by the fact that more people can be DPs now than could be in the past. And the argument that they rely upon is that, well, it's not on film, therefore it's not filmmaking, or like you brought up earlier, because the technology is more accessible and more democratized, you're going to get more films, which mean more bad films. And there's some truth to that. But you also get good films from people that wouldn't have had the access that you wanted in the past. Someone could shoot a film on a crappy VHS camera, and yeah, the aesthetics won't be the same as like a 35 with a full, 3-point light set, blah, 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 blah. But that stuff isn't filmmaking. The storytelling with montage, that's the filmmaking. And if you're a good enough filmmaker, you can make something incredibly intriguing on the worst materials. That's where the art should shine through, hopefully. You can make something on 35 millimeter film with all of the trappings of a major motion picture, and it could suck. It could be absolutely worthless to watch.
Right, like Theodore Rex with Whoopi Goldberg, where she's a cop who gets teamed up with a dinosaur.
There you go. Taxi Cab with Queen Latifah and what's his face, Jimmy Fallon. Isn't that Taxi Cab?
But I'm wondering
Not Taxi
why,
Driver.
I'm wondering why you don't like that movie so much. That movie's great.
Because I'm a snob.
It's about racing around town. I'm a huge Queen Latifah fan. I think that Queen Latifah makes some great choices. Bringing Down the House with Steve Martin, phenomenal movie.
But regardless, it's all storytelling through montage. There's a great, I'm sure you've taught it many times. There's a Hitchcock piece where he gives an example of a shot of an old man walking out of a house, and he sees something, and then it cuts, and you see a little baby sitting on the ground playing, and then you cut back to the old man, and he smiles. If you go back into that sequence and you substitute the shot of the baby with like a beautiful model in a bikini sunbathing, and that changes the montage. It completely changes the meaning of that third shot of the old man smiling. The first time he was a sweet grandpa, and now he's a creepy old man. That's the art form. And that's why it gets confusing between film and television and webisodes and, what makes this or what makes that. It's because the underlying art form is the same, but there are trappings on top of that we get hung up on that we try to define it with instead.
I think that's why it's so important too to like always be considering the medium, because to me, the medium of film is very different. Like, yes, you can shoot. I could have a script and we could just pick up a Bolex versus, a DSLR camera, and we could shoot the script both ways. But I feel like part of the process should always be about like thinking through the medium and why you're making that choice aesthetically. So for example, one I'm going to probably get the year wrong, but I want to say it was right around the time, which doesn't seem that long ago, that we were going from standard definition to high definition. And, it was just like, wow, HD is like the new thing. And then everything that was SD was just like, oh, gross and disgusting. And, like so yesterday. But we had, so I think it was, and again, I might be getting the timeline kind of mixed up, but I think it was right around that time period. And we had a student in doing their capstone project. And so everybody, of course, is shooting, in HD. And I think that might have been around the same time too, that we had our last student group that wanted to produce their capstone on 16 millimeter color negative, which was awesome. Nobody's done that since. But one of the people in that class wanted to shoot on VHS. And it was specifically because of like the aesthetic that they wanted, the story they were telling, and kind of like where that kind of localizing that project in, like we were talking about that spectrum of, video art versus film versus cinema. But it was a really strong aesthetic choice, and everyone in the class just seemed like bewildered, like, why would you ever do that? It'll look like crap. But he did, and it was really cool project. But part of it was because he was really embracing that aesthetic, and he wanted a specific look, and it was like situated within that world of VHS, versus like shooting it on HD and then putting some kind of weird filter on it or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
So
that's very cool.
Yeah.
I love when people can figure out different things that they want to do. I had a buddy who was making a movie about a guy who lost his glasses. And it was about how he sees the world kind of in a different way on his regular commute to work when he loses his glasses. And he said, well, he's like, there's a lot of, POV shots. And he's like, I just don't know how to get it right. And so he talked to a couple people about like, well, how should this look? Because you don't want to make your audience sick from looking through that. And someone goes, oh, just take some saran wrap, put some saran wrap over the lens. And he was like, what? And he's like, yeah, put some saran wrap. It'll have a weird glare when you hit light that that you wouldn't normally get because there's another reflective surface there. It's going to smudge up the view, but it's not going to completely, it's not like you just all of a sudden just smeared like Vaseline over the lens or something. And he did it. And I was like, that is amazing. And he goes, yeah, and it cost me 10 cents. And so, was it necessity is the mother of invention?
Yeah.
And I love when you find out about stuff. One of my favorite stories from Hollywood is about how Jaws comes out And Spielberg is labeled as this genius, not showing the shark until the very end, like this master of suspense. And then you find out that like the intention was to show the shark through the entire movie. He just was such a horrible filmmaker that he sank the shark on the first day and they could never get it to work. So what he did is he's like, we'll break off chunks of it and we'll show like a fin here. And you think like, well, you're really lucky. That and John Williams, like if you didn't have those two things, this movie might have been total and complete garbage and we wouldn't have had the E.T.s and Indiana Jones and then some of the regrettable stuff that he's been making lately that I really wish he'd go back to the drawing board on.
Who was it? Was it Alexander Payne who you listened to talk about directing?
Mm-hmm.
Who had some choice words about Steven Spielberg?
He sure did. But I think that's because they're both trying to tell different types of stories, right? Spielberg has a sense of adventure or trying to, give people a time machine feeling of being back at a moment in history. And Alexander Payne's style of filmmaking is he really wants the character to be the thing that speaks to you. And I think he wants you to be drawn in by how much you are like that character and how many similarities you have. I've said this before, but in the movie Election, the character actor who plays the principal is the best adaptation, or like the best interpretation of a teacher I have ever seen on film. And I don't know if it's in the writing or if it's in the performance, but it is so good. He interrupts, like there are kids yelling during a presentation, and he stops and he doesn't bring the microphone up to him. He bends down to it and he goes, all right, everyone, come on. I'll treat you like adults, but if you're gonna act like children, I'll treat you like children. And I was like, oh my God, that is so perfect. Did you just like rip something out of my own personal experience?
You just made me flash back to one of the worst moments of my school career.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So 7th grade, I went to Ben Franklin Junior High School, and my dad was a teacher, right? And he'd been in the system forever, and he was back at Ben Franklin again that year. And I love my father. I have nothing bad to say about him here, but he's got the ability, what we call his teacher voice or his teacher presence, where he'll make grown adults feel uncomfortable just because he'll make them realize they've done something wrong. This was Halloween, and the drama kids in 9th grade had made like a little haunted house like up in this part of the school. And so they brought all of us 7th graders into the auditorium, and they would take us in groups to go through the haunted house. And while we were not watching the haunted house, we would watch Jumanji starring Robin Williams, which was on the screen. And obviously none of us want to watch Jumanji. And
sounds like Fargo Public Schools was breaking some FBI
probably
rules.
And you could tell that the kids who were going through the haunted house were messing with it. They weren't being respectful, all this bad. We were just being crappy kids. And at one point, the movie stops and the lights come up. And my dad, who everyone knows is my dad, walks on stage, looks pissed. His arms are crossed, and he just stands there. He's waiting for us to quiet down. He's just standing there, just looking at us, waiting for us all to quiet down. And it starts to get really uncomfortable in the room, and kids start quieting down. And he gets us to like 350 kids in a room, just brimming with hormones. And we're with kids that we didn't go to elementary school with, and it's Halloween and all this crazy stuff. So we're jacked, right? And he just waits for us to calm down. And then once we calm down, he stood there for another 5 minutes and just stared at us. And that's all he had to do. And I got so much crap for that with my fellow students. So you telling that story with the principal made me immediately flash back to 7th grade and me just sinking into my seat while my dad effectively silently scolded my entire 7th grade class for like 10 minutes. I don't want to go. Let's take me away from this memory, you guys. Bring me away tell me something happy. Kaya, what'd you have for dinner yesterday?
Oh, you know what I did yesterday? I went curling.
What?
For the first time.
Really?
Yeah, I curled.
Do your legs hurt?
I think no, but I think I could be an Olympian.
Could you?
Yeah.
What role did you take on?
Wow. Either you're incredibly gifted or curling is super
or
easy.
I'm lying. I don't know. But what did you say?
What role did you take on the curling team?
I was third.
Okay.
Does that sound like an official role?
What does that person do?
And then I was like vice skip because the fourth has to go. When they throw, then somebody has to replace the skip. But yeah, I mean, like, so I did the learn to curl session, and the first few throws I did, like I couldn't even get it past like there's like these red lines, and it has to be your stone is in play if you let it go. You have to let it go before it gets to that first red line. And if it doesn't get past that second red line into the house, then it's not in play. So the first like practice ones, I just totally bombed it. But when we actually played the game, I got a couple on the pin. Even.
Ooh.
Yeah. But it was awesome. It was really awesome.
You should join Team USA. Get going right now.
Yeah, I got to find some extra time and get on a league.
So we're living in a world where these weird mini ultra specific sports are getting huge numbers. Curling. The FM Curling Club is booked all the time, and companies are going there. I've been there a couple times.
It's fun.
I know a bunch of cops who have a team called the Thin Blue Line, and I watch them curl from time to time. And then I interviewed some curlers who let me like practice with them, and I was like, oh, I don't have a skill set for this, but I have many other fine qualities. Skee ball tournaments right now and skee ball leagues, enormous on the East Coast.
Wow.
Right? Axe throwing is really having a moment right now. There are all of these ultra specific sports that people are really getting into, and they're really like, I'm kind of jealous that I'm not a part of it. There's a kickball league in Fargo for adults where they play kickball and then they go and have beer.
I heard about that.
Right.
That sounds
Doesn't
super
that sound great?
fun. Yeah.
So maybe I'll have to find a sport that I can get into. You want to join a team with me?
I'm so afraid of any sport where there's like two team captains picking who's on their team. That's what I don't want.
Well,
I want to
curling,
avoid that.
it wouldn't be like that. And they have beer there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty fun.
Well, like Bill Brooks, previous guest here, like in his love of pinball.
Sure.
Right? So like they've got pinball leagues.
Right. Are we going to call that a sport?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm cool with it. I'm cool with calling that a sport.
Oh, I call a lot of things sports so that way I can be in sports. If sports were only like football and basketball, I'd be like, oh, I'm excluded from everything.
I don't have endurance, physical endurance, which is one of my issues. I could work on that, but I don't think I'm gonna. I got a lot of Netflix I gotta watch.
Did you play any sports like as a kid or anything like that, Kaya?
Yeah, I was in figure skating for many years.
What?
Yeah.
Didn't you make a movie about Fargo street hockey?
Fargo Street Hawks.
Street Hawks. I'm sorry.
Yes, there's no street hockey, but it is some hardcore BMX biking.
There we go.
No false metal.
Got it.
Yeah.
No false metal?
No false metal.
What does that mean?
You just have to get into the subculture that is the Fargo Street Hawks.
Okay.
It has this whole following actually. You can go on Facebook and see all about it.
As a street gang, do they still exist?
Oh yes.
They do? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you join them? Did they put you on a BMX?
I am a Fargo Street Hawk, yes.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yep.
I think we got to talk about this now. A lot of people haven't heard of the Street Hawks.
Yeah.
It sounds like I'm saying street dogs. I'm not. Street Hawks.
Street Hawks. Yeah. The Fargo Street Hawks is kind of a subculture in and of itself. But yeah, if you start, now that you've heard of it, it might just appear to you in different places. Yeah, it's very mysterious.
I am a big fan of finding out that there are pockets of the world that I knew nothing about. That's one of the reasons we started this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Because we should get a member, other than yourself.
We're on a mission to get JJ to meet everyone in the world. That's the premise of the podcast. We're getting
so if
there.
people could stop having babies for like 1 minute, we could maybe catch up.
We're going to do more than 2 episodes a week.
So figure skating, tell me a little bit about this. How long were you skating?
I don't know how old I want to say I was maybe like 4 when I started, but I dropped out of that probably when I was, I don't know, 12, 11. So it wasn't that long. And then I don't know, I maybe played a year of soccer in high school.
If you were in that from 4 to 11, that's 7 years. That's the bulk of your adolescence.
Yeah, I think that the thing that kind of maybe I just got interested in too many other other stuff, I guess. But when they started like putting this harness on you with this rope on a pulley to practice axles, I was like, this sucks. This really sucks. Because they kind of like, you go in and you jump and then they pull the rope so that you start spinning and then they don't really help you on the like down part. So I would just like fall on my knees and it was just terrible. But yeah, then I got into snowboarding for a while. So that was fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was in a half pipe competition once. I think I was 13 and I got first place.
Nice.
I was the only 13-year-old in there, so that's kind of how. Yeah.
Like the 13-year-olds division?
For girls, yeah.
Got it.
Girls,
Like I'm going out on
13, top. Yeah, and so, but I can still say I was first. It was It was a really terrible run though. It was all like Andes Tower Hills, total sheet of ice, worst weather possible. Probably didn't even know how to groom a half pipe over there at that time. It was pretty terrible, but. Got a medal for it.
And you've got these cool phrases now, like groom a half pipe that you can say. That's awesome.
I wouldn't know if it's well groomed or not. I know that sometimes people call it fresh, like pow pow.
Yeah. The only snowboarding I've ever done is on PlayStation with cool borders too. That was about it. I once did skiing as a kid, but I cried on the bunny hill and then I quit.
I think now I'm sure like Detroit Mountain and everything, like they've probably got all the stuff they need to really groom really well. But I mean, this was, in the 90s and it just, yeah.
Well, there was still the fight going on between the skiers and the snowboarders.
Oh yeah, for sure. And now, like I go skiing and I feel kind of funny about it. Like
you're now part of the fuddy-duddies who were
I'm super lame. I like cross country skiing. I do that quite a bit, but like, yeah, every time I put those skis on, I'm like, this is really... So but I do still have my snowboard.
Do you really?
I'm thinking about pulling it out this year, but I'm worried I'm going to break my legs.
No.
You don't think so?
Why are you worried about that specifically?
Because I'm older now. It's old.
Do you
and like
take calcium regularly?
Well, no. Now that you mention it.
You're probably right. You're probably.
But you're strapped in, and so if you fall, like with skis, skis just come popping right off. When you fall with a snowboard, you just keep getting your body wrapped around and around. And since I haven't done it in so long, I'm just...
don't start with the double diamond, go take it easy for the first one. But I think it'll probably come back to you.
I'm just not sure. Is it like riding a bike or not? I don't know.
I think it is.
I think I might have to try it though this year because,
I mean, you've held on to that snowboard for a long time.
Maybe talk to your doctor first.
The kids on the mountain will look at the snowboard and be like, what is that? What is that?
Doesn't even have Wi-Fi.
They're like, it's vintage.
Does yours even have a GPS monitor? Bitch. Probably not. It's supposed to track your descent.
It sounds like winter weather sports, and you really go hand in hand. I mean, we're talking figure skating and cross country skiing, snowboarding. Uh-huh. So, are there any other winter sports that you enjoy? All right, let me ask you this.
I don't know.
When was the last time you put on figure skates?
Oh, well, I take my daughter out. I can't do anything though, like now. I mean, like I can skate backwards and forwards. I can do like some fish bubbles and I can pretend to do a waltz jump, but that's about as crazy as it gets.
Do you know what it would be like if you put Tucker and I in figure skates right now?
I think that
I still
you should
need the
have
chair
an episode
in front of me.
You should do that, like a live streaming episode of go over to the Clara Barton. There's a warming house there.
I got scarred early on that too.
Yeah.
I got scarred early on that too. So I went to Horseman Elementary School and they had an ice rink in the back, and every winter you get to go ice skating. And I don't know who decided this, but apparently, at least with my grade, if you were a boy, you were supposed to have hockey skates.
Yeah.
And if you were a girl, you were supposed to have figure skates. And no one gave my mom or me the memo. So I showed up with figure skates thinking they're just skates. That's what you skate. And I got so much crap from the other boys in my grade. And then I already wasn't good at skating. So now I was bad at skating in apparently the wrong skates. And so I started with the chair because I couldn't keep my balance, and I was a little pudgy kid who wanted to read comic books. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't even do that. So I ended up either sitting in the warming house talking about comic books with the other indoor kids who wanted to do that, or we'd go like play in the snow and we'd just keep our skates on the whole time because you're supposed to do it.
So I went to Clara Barton Elementary, and I know that skating rink really well. And my skating ability was on point as a kid. My speed was awesome. I could take turns, like it was great. but I could not stop. So no matter what, I know I was heading towards either the boards for the hockey rink, so that can be the thing that stops me, or I would do this thing where I pretty much approach the snowdrift at full speed and then try and like take the momentum and walk on the skates.
Yeah.
But I think that's what really kept me from being great, was not knowing how to stop. And so when I saw D2, the Mighty Ducks, and there's the guy who was a great skater, but he couldn't stop, I was like, dang, he's just like me.
It's like somebody wrote you into the film.
Right. Only he's way more handsome, and he's going to learn how to do the knuckle puck.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in the lobby in a crowded movie theater waiting to go in for D2. Like, like Mighty Ducks was a religion in this town. Like that was the movie to go see.
I remember seeing a double feature. So I have a movie stub collection that I've been keeping since 1992.
Wow.
And I think my earliest ticket stub, and you can barely see it, it was from Century Cinema, is for a double feature of Aladdin and the Mighty Ducks. And I remember in between, while they were like switching the movies over, they had a Mickey Mouse with like a 15-minute, but it was that famous Mickey Mouse like with his hands that became the iconic watch. And I remember thinking like how cool that was. And my friend's mom went to the Hardee's that was nearby and got us burgers, but mine had mustard on it. And so I said thank you, but no thank you. And then I think that they thought I was a real brat. Like they're like, we got you dinner, and you're just what? And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't muscle my way through this.
Wow.
Just want.
Do you remember like first times going to the movies as a kid?
Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to figure out. I feel like E.T. might have been my first movie as a kid. I'm not sure though, but I know that I screamed when he comes out of the corn.
Yeah, I got scared when he nearly dies, when he's on the floor and he's very pale and they're screaming.
We're sick.
Yeah.
I will tell you something about E.T. that has affected me even as a 36-year-old man. I don't trust the government. And it comes from the movie E.T. I'm like, they're going to show up and they're going to put a bubble over my house, and then they're going to make Dee Wallace cry. Like, nope. I don't trust you, government. Not one bit.
It's a pretty healthy fear.
It really is.
Also, you eat Reese's Pieces all the time?
I do. Yeah. Something that drives me nuts is when people say Reese's Pieces. And I'm like, first of all, neither of those words are pronounced like that. It's Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, and Reese's Pieces. It fits well. Reese's Pieces, not so much.
No. So don't say that, Kaya.
I'll try not to.
I mean, I would appreciate it a lot. It was a movie snack. What's your go-to movie snack?
Well, I really like popcorn, and then I
How
like
do you like
to
your popcorn?
Warm.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
With some butter on it.
Now, butter, like, are you
cold and 2-day-old?
Well, I mean, what do you mean? What do I like? How do I like my popcorn?
Well, I think like, do you like extra butter flavored topping? Do you like real butter? Like, are you putting real butter at home? But will you accept
guides
movie
them
theater?
through the process when he orders at a movie theater.
Yeah. At home, some butter and some salt is pretty,
Microwave? Are you doing microwave popcorn, or are you popping it on the stove?
No, we've got microwave. Yeah, but like not like in the bag. Have you guys had Amish popcorn before?
No.
It's like hull-less, and I'll have to bring you some. And like, my husband Christopher started buying it like in bulk. Like these things like start showing up like it's huge box. I'm like, what's in here? It's like, it's Amish popcorn.
I am so intrigued.
But it's like it's really small. Like once it pops, it's kind of small. It's not like these giant. It's really good. Really good.
Amish popcorn. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna look it up.
Lady finger. Yeah, they've got all these different varieties.
That's the brand.
It's like the type of corn or something.
Huh.
Yeah, I guess I don't know much about corn.
How sad would you be if your husband's like, I've developed a new type of corn and I've named it after your fingers, Gwen? And he's like, look at the cob. It's very reminiscent of your index finger, isn't it? Okay, so you like the popcorn,
and then I kind of like to have some chocolate in there too. Like not in the popcorn, but like something.
You like the
chocolatey.
taste of something
Little
salty
savory.
and then
a
a little
little
something.
sweet.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
What's your chocolate go-to?
Well, for a while I was into Goobers, chocolate covered peanuts, but I've been kind of, harassed about it. So now, it's like, oh, who likes Goobers?
Who has anti-goober sentiment that they got to tell you about it?
Christopher.
Oh. He's like, Amish popcorn's where it's at. What are you doing with those goobers?
Yeah. But
if the Amish made goobers, he'd start probably getting into it.
Like Snickers.
Amish
he might.
goobers would be great.
Amish peanuts. Okay. But Snickers, I don't know. When I was younger, I really liked Sour Patch Kids, but now I'm not as into that anymore.
They're hard from on my teeth.
Yeah. No, not good anymore. But yeah, something chocolatey. What's yours?
So when I go to a movie theater, I get a large popcorn. I will sit and eat that popcorn through the whole movie. It's part of the ritual. When I was on Jenny Craig, popcorn wasn't allowed, and I think that's why I quit that program. Like I had lost 70 pounds at that point.
It's a whole grain.
It is. But it's like I love salt on it, so I don't have no butter topping, but I like to salt it halfway through. I like to get in there. If I go to an AMC theater, I bring my own salt because the AMC theater chain uses like the thick granulated salt, and I like the super fine popcorn salt. So I'll bring my own little salt shaker with me. Then I do like something chocolatey, and it goes between Bunch of Crunch and Raisinets. Recently, I had homemade Raisinets that were made by a woman in Battle Lake, Minnesota, that were the best candy I've had in my entire life.
That sounds good.
She uses like a really high grade fine chocolate, like milk chocolate, and then the raisins she gets from like a.
Is it Amish raisins?
They're not Amish raisins, but they might be
Amish don't believe in raisins.
They might
probably
be Napa Valley raisins. So maybe they would have been wine at one point, and maybe that's why I like them so much. But they're good. I also I don't use the Amish, but I use the Hooterite community to buy my turkeys and chickens. They've got the best poultry, really good stuff over there, and they also clean if you pickle cucumbers. And you order them from the Hooterite communities, they will pre-wash all of that vegetation, which is a huge coup to those of us who enjoy making homemade canned pickles. You don't like pickles, so he doesn't. He's out of this conversation completely.
Yeah, but I'm okay with that too.
I love pickles.
You guys can have them all. I'll take your mustard and mayo, and you take my pickles.
I'm not into the bread and butter though. Ugh.
No, it's the worst, right?
It's disgusting.
And like, how many times have you been like, "Oh, a pickle," and then you get tricked?
They fake you out.
Well, what do you mean, bread and butter? What do you?
They're like sweet.
Oh, it's a type of pickles. What you're saying? Got it.
Yeah, I'm all about the dill.
I thought you meant you don't like
Spicy
bread and
pickles.
butter, and I thought, well, that makes zero sense.
Kaya, we're becoming best friends because
yeah.
that's what I make is homemade dill and spicy pickles.
Those are the best. I will say though that if I have to eat a slightly sweeter pickle, Burn Bombs, I will eat those. Those are really, really, really good. That's where I draw the line.
I wish I liked pickles because I see the enjoyment that others get out of them.
Crunchy.
I mean, on paper it sounds amazing, but any time I've ever tried them, I've just never, ever liked them. Anything pickled, I don't like. I love onions. I hate pickled onions. Yeah. I haven't found a pickled dish. I've tried every time I've seen a new one. I've tried it because I'm trying to be an adult, but I've never liked it.
So you just don't like the brine taste.
It's hard for me to pinpoint exactly what it is I don't like. When I've eaten a pickle, there's nothing about the pickle that I like.
Huh?
Yeah. But I can also live a full life and not eat them because there's so many other things to eat.
What about pickled juice?
No. But I love dill flavoring. Right, but that's not pickled.
Like
that's
you would
different.
eat dill pickle potato chips.
Yes, yes. That it's because it's just the dill flavoring that's there. It's just like a spice or whatever. That tastes really good. I love dill bread. Dill bread is my jam for sure. But if it was dill bread with pickles on it, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Interesting. I like this.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Kaya, we've had you for almost I was going to say 115, but that means 1 hour and 12 minutes. That's what that readout says. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
You're
We've learned a
welcome.
lot about you. We're going to go figure skating at some point and eat pickles. And then I want to watch this nostalgia movie as well. I think this sounds like a really neat little flick to check out.
Yeah, you should. I'm pretty sure you can find it online. And so maybe we can even... Yeah, I'll send you a link to it or something like that. But
Wonderful.
yes, you should like do a live show from Clara Barton skating rink and have pickles.
I think I can hook that up.
We need new concepts for live shows. We've done a couple live shows. We did one where we taught podcasting. We did one where we were celebrating our 100th episode. And the most recent live episode we did a commentary track to the Nutty Professor 2 in front of an audience over at Century. Yeah. So I think you've hit the nail on the head on what the next one's got to be. Watch JJ ice skate and eat pickles with Kaya.
I'm going to fall. Well, thank you very much. And so if people want to see some of your work, is it available online at all?
Yeah, I should probably look into where my online life is. I really am not good at Facebook or any kind of anything. But yeah, I have some stuff on Vimeo. I just don't know which ones are live and not live. Sometimes you got to shut them down for festivals. So
if any are live, though, we'd love to share them like on Facebook and stuff. That'd be awesome.
Tucker has a bunch of videos of me dressed as a giant man baby. That occasionally I'll be like, hey, I'm going to run for school board. Could you
None
take
of those
that
are
off?
currently live on the internet right now.
Oh, we got to get those things up.
Yeah, I didn't go to college, but I have a whole slew of movies that I would call my student films, which were ones that are like, okay, I'm glad I made this. Me and my friends had fun. Time to go be away now and not be out for people to see. And those would be the Baby Bumpy movies are definitely in there. But I can hook you up, buddy. I don't want to deprive you of your acting brilliance in a baby diaper.
Those are good. Those are really good.
I feel like I remember seeing that at some point.
There was,
Sounds familiar.
They did the 2-minute film festival. There was a couple in there and stuff.
Yeah. I also had the worst beard I've ever had in my entire life because I can't grow facial hair. It's just I can't. It's just not my.
It was just more of a facial shrub. It wasn't really a beard.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was a facial
shrub. It's like a tumbleweed that's attached to you.
Yeah,
to your neck.
Like I fell asleep, it hit my face, and then no one told me about it. Kaya K. Nelson, thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you so much.
A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJMeetsWorld and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. I can't believe she hasn't heard of Captain Ron. I think that's maybe she should have to go back and tell that to the board at MSUM.